Hey, and welcome to futurethinkers.org, a podcast about the evolution of technology, society, and consciousness. I'm Mike Gilliland.
And I'm Yuvia Ivanova. If you're new to the show and you want to get a list of our favorite books, popular episodes, and to join our community, go to futurethinkers.org/start. Hey guys, this is the fourth episode in our Jungian archetype series for the mature masculine, and today we're talking about the King Archetype. So the King Archetype is the integrated version of all the other mature archetypes. So warrior, magician, and lover are all baked into the king. And so this is the archetype that usually develops latest in life when all of the man's positive qualities have solidified and kind of integrated into a solid whole, where he's no longer being pulled into a million different directions, where he has developed a center, he knows who he is, and he acts from that center. He acts with integrity.
Interestingly about this one, that in childhood, it's one of the first ones to develop.
The first one, yeah.
And I think that's especially interesting because it happens because the child is made the center of attention of everything. When you're a little baby, especially a little boy, everything you do just gets attention from mom, from dad, from people around you. You know, you're loud, you're experimenting, you're trying new things, you're learning new things, and anything you do just gets like praise and applause. And it's interesting how that continues in a lot of forms as you mature into the masculine adult form, and how the shadows and the positive versions all kind of continue on unless you learn to integrate properly.
Mm-hmm. So in that sense, the divine child, which is the positive manifestation of the childhood version of the king, it's simultaneously powerless and powerful. It's powerless because it's a baby and it requires adults to keep it alive, but at the same time, it demands all of the attention, and people are happy to give it because the baby that manifests as this archetype is full of joy, wonder for life, zest, enthusiasm, and it's just, it's a very kind of
Christ-like even. It like makes people think that there's hope for the world. There's a new beginning. There's a new generation on the way. So it gives people hope for the future.
Yeah, actually a lot of religious stories kind of have this divine origin of the baby being born. It's the same with Buddha and a number of other characters.
Yeah, it's a very inspiring figure.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's in one of its shadow forms, let's go with the positive shadow form, the one where it's more active. I don't mean positive in like a good thing. It's the Armchair Tyrant.
Yeah.
High Chair Tyrant, sorry.
High Chair Tyrant,
yeah.
Yes. The High Chair Tyrant is the child who throws a tantrum whenever he doesn't get enough attention, or even if he does get enough attention, he doesn't appreciate it and gives nothing back.
Yeah, and this one has super unrealistic expectations. Like even when it gets all the attention it wants, its expectations can never be met. It's never happy.
Yeah, it wants more. So it's the embodiment of narcissism and entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see this in little kids who are, little boys sitting in a high chair, and you're feeding it its favorite food, and it will take his spoon and just throw it on the floor or smush it into your face as you're feeding him.
Sometimes that's just curiosity, though. It's just the magician studying. What happens when I do this to mom? Sometimes it's the temper tantrum, too.
Yeah. And sometimes you have an adult exhibiting this archetype as well. And we see this behavior in rock stars or politicians who just demand all the attention, who are very narcissistic and will freak out if you don't give it to them. So sometimes, Donald Trump exhibits this behavior, or...
This is especially common in celebrities.
Yeah.
People who kind of are constantly getting attention and think that they're the center of the universe.
And it's never enough.
And that's why there's a continuation from the childhood to adulthood, because the child believes it's the center of the universe because it kind of is of the family unit. But when they don't grow out of that, they become these narcissistic celebrity kind of people.
Yeah, and they think that they can get away with anything. So these are celebrities who are constantly having affairs or going bankrupt, and they think that they're invincible. But of course they
won't
aren't.
get caught.
Yeah, they won't get caught.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the opposite version that actually works in tandem is the Weakling Prince. So this is the pushover who's listless, has no enthusiasm for life, no zest, just no curiosity. He's just kind of given up. But he still wants attention. He just gets it in different ways. He gets it kind of by playing the victim and manipulating people in that way. And he's passive aggressive. And then sometimes he lashes out also as the high chair tyrant.
Yeah, this is another one that's kind of a version of the Mr. Nice Guy syndrome, where a guy thinks that because he's nice, he's owed everything.
Yes, so these are the guys who are, will hang out with a girl and never make any moves on her and just be super nice and then just throw a fit when she denies them. I've definitely had experience with people like that were just super nice and would, be friendly and then suddenly make a move and I'd be like, no, dude, we're just friends. And they would just call me horrible names and just suddenly get horrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, the same thing. And so maybe not quite such a horrible version, but very kind of pushover and listless is Jerry from Rick and Morty.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Jerry. We've been watching a lot of Rick and Morty lately, and yeah, he's totally the weakling.
Yeah.
Okay, so you brought up Donald Trump as the armchair or the high chair tyrant. I like that you said it's the child version because he's so narcissistic. He hasn't even come out of the high chair.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, he's not the tyrannical king. He's the childhood version.
Yeah. Huh. Okay, so what are some of the traits of the king in his fullest?
So the king in his fullest, to go a complete 180 here, he acts with integrity. So he doesn't just virtue signal, he doesn't just project certain qualities. He has actually decided for himself internally what his principles are, and he operates from those principles. And he is unchanging. He's kind of a rock where he acts the same way, with different people, the same way on a Monday or on a Sunday, the same way in different situations. He's whole in himself. He's consistent. And so this is also kind of a principle that is illustrated in a lot of spiritual drawings, where the king is the thing that kind of is the connection between the heaven and the earth realm. So he's that center. He's the channel through which the energy connects.
Which is why I think people look to the king for blessing. And that's actually another thing that's super important about the king archetype is having the responsibility and the care to take care of your kingdom, the people in it, and to bless them.
Yeah, so he doesn't act from ego, he acts for the common good.
Mm-hmm.
And
this actually reminds me of a talk. I've seen a bunch of Jordan Peterson's talks where he talks about how he's taught young men to believe that there's virtue in taking responsibility, and he encourages them. He says you can do it. I mean, you can take on responsibility. You can kind of put your nose to the grindstone and fix your life and become something great that society reveres and is thankful for. And these kids, young men, hear that as if it's for the first time and act as if no one's ever said that to them. They're so grateful. And it's interesting that thing in itself always brings Jordan Peterson to tears when he hears that from people, because you can see he's had it in his life and he sees such a tragedy in it being missing with young men of today's age.
Yeah. And so there's this expectation that young men will just get themselves together, but actually this act of blessing from the king archetype, from that king energy, is really important. Yes, from a mentor, or just from an older man who is fully manifested, to recognize the gifts, the abilities, the accomplishments, the legitimate accomplishments of young men. And it has to come from that king archetype.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a funny one. That one's interesting. I can see that missing in my own life as a kid, and I can see how that would be such a common thing. I mean, that our generation, I mean, of all the people who are alive today, are so narcissistic. It's so much more than it ever was centuries before. And, you've got generations of parents who are still kind of focused on themselves, even though they've got kids in tow. And I think that's kind of what happens and is continuing to happen in our generation and future generations, is we're focused on ourselves while our kids grow up and get I shouldn't say no attention, they get the wrong attention.
Yeah. So this is actually something, this is a trait that is present in all the mature, fully manifested versions of the 4 masculine archetypes, and it's a responsibility to others. And that responsibility is different for the different archetypes. So for the king archetype, that responsibility is to bless, which means to recognize other people as whole, which heals them. It's not just kind of a mundane thing. It's actually something that is borderline spiritual. It heals people when they're seen as whole and when they're appreciated for what they are.
It's almost as if they can't see it in themselves, and when they're told that someone else sees it in them, they all of a sudden operate from this new sense of power, like, oh, wow, I can do it. I can accomplish whatever I'm setting out to do because someone else says I can. They can see something that I don't.
Yeah, and it's not just any person. It's a person who has life experience and wisdom and who is fully integrated themselves that sees you. Yeah. Because other people can just flatter you, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the other qualities of the king? The king is also a maker of order. So he is a master of his domain, and he protects that domain and everything in it.
Yeah, we can see examples of this from The Lion King is probably one of the best ones. Mufasa literally takes Simba up to the cliffside and says, everything the light touches is our domain. And don't go over there into the shadow version or shadow area, whatever it was.
So that is a part of the duty of the king also, is to know what his domain is. So that is sovereignty. That's what sovereignty is. Knowing what is within your sphere of influence and what isn't. It's knowing that you have limits and knowing that your power is temporary, that it won't last forever. And so Mufasa also says that a time will come when I will no longer be king and you will become king.
Ah, that's such a good, man, that archetype is just perfect, isn't it? It's so well shown in that movie.
Yeah. And it's also having humility to recognize your vulnerability. It's a king who is not full of himself to think that he's completely invulnerable. And actually, that is when he thinks that he's invulnerable, or when he's willfully blind, that is when the shadow version can take over, which is represented by Scar in this case.
Yeah. Incredible narcissism. Fear of power, a view of power being finite. Yeah. Therefore, you have to protect it.
And he's paranoid because of that.
Yeah. And doesn't feel like he has any responsibility to pass on that power eventually to another generation. He wants to keep it all for himself and hoards that.
Yeah. And he's willing to throw anyone under the bus to maintain that power and to increase it, including people in his own family and those he should love.
Yeah. Wow, I'm just realizing how important of a movie that is for the king archetype. Go rewatch that movie, man.
Yeah, and another interesting trait of the shadow king, the tyrannical king, is that he is hyper-intellectual and hyper-rational. So he is unfeeling. He doesn't have empathy. He doesn't take into account that people are imperfect, that he himself is imperfect, that people make mistakes and they need to be forgiven, and that people are emotional and sometimes act irrationally. So if a king goes into a mode where he's hyper-rational, that's when he can become the shadow. I think this is why a lot of the evil villains are portrayed as geniuses, as like scientific kind of hyper-rational geniuses. That's one of the manifestations of the Shadow King, that he has lost touch with emotion, with humility, with humanness.
It really relates to the shadow version of the magician as well.
Yeah.
So there's one more element to the king. I think we've talked about blessing already. Productivity and creativity is another element that's super important. So a society views the king and his ability to be productive, in other words, have children, is kind of a blessing on the society when they think the king is virile and having tons of children, that crops are going to be good, that the entire realm will be productive.
Yeah, and this is also symbolic because this is also productivity is what are the kinds of things you create in your work? What kinds of environments do you create? What kinds of systems do you set up? And that's again the ordering principle, because the king is a representation of the divine order put into physical form. So he recreates the divine order in the world around him. And this is where the integrity comes from. He's not just telling other people what to do, he's actually living it himself. And he creates the world around him in such a way that other people can thrive. So that's another quality of the king, is that he enables other people, he empowers other people, and he delights in seeing them thrive and succeed.
So this is a result of a lot of maturity and having gone through all of the other archetypes into the full manifestation. But it's also a matter of a lot of experience as well, of knowing how life cycles work and how life unfolds with time. So it's enough time, and then it's early integration of all the other archetypes that creates a good king.
Yeah, right. He's mature. He's seen some shit.
Yeah, seen some shit. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And therefore he has the confidence to pass on that power, because he knows that's just part of the life cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. The king is a protector also. So having sovereignty means that you know where your realm ends and where chaos begins, or where evil begins, or the shadows begin. So in Game of Thrones, for example, that's what the wall represents. Beyond the wall is chaos. There's evil, there's death, there's wildlings, there's things that, it's ice, which represents death as
and
well.
within the king's realm is order.
Is order, yeah. And so for the king, he has to protect that constantly, and he has to protect everything that is within his realm, which means the people around him. So in mundane terms, it's, if you are the head of the family, then you have to protect your wife and children, and maybe your parents as well. You have to take care of people. You have to make sure their well-being is a priority. So you're not just living for yourself, you're also ensuring the well-being of others, and you're constantly encouraging them and making sure that they can thrive under your care.
I think the final one is legacy.
Yeah.
And you see this a lot in the history books of famous kings, where they've left giant edifices in their path. They've left churches, giant buildings, monuments, all types of things, giant roads. There's always this kind of idea of legacy when you're a
successful king.
Successful king, yeah.
Yeah. And this can also manifest in people who are not literal rulers. It could be a great book that you wrote, or it could be, the house that you left for your children. It could be something really mundane. It could be, that people remember you as a good person that helped and encouraged people and blessed them and protected them when they needed it, who was centered, who was a rock in time of peril. So the king is a rock. He is somebody that people can rely on. He's not going to, he's not going to run away from responsibility. He embraces responsibility.
So let's move into some of the shadows of the king in the adult form.
Right. So we talked about the tyrannical king, who is paranoid, thinks that power is a finite resource. He's throwing people under the bus. He lashes out at people, often violently, when they don't give him the respect that he thinks he deserves. And this also has a polarity, which is the weak version.
Yeah, the weakling.
The weakling.
So the interesting one about the weakling that I found is that people who are occupied by the weakling archetype like to hand off their power to others. They don't like to make decisions. They like decisions to be made for them. So as soon as responsibility falls on their shoulders, they give it away.
Yeah. So with rulers, we can see those who basically the council makes all the decisions and the ruler just sits on the throne and does nothing.
I don't think you see weakling kings very much. especially now. Like, I think you see tyrants a lot, and you see, even your example with Trump, you see the high chair tyrant, but I don't think you see a lot of weaklings. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can give me examples here. It's just too easy to be called out publicly for that. And there's always someone else willing to jump up and take power. That's the other thing. I think there's just too many people and too much competition where the weakling just gets trampled over, leaves no legacy, leaves nothing behind.
So there's a really good point that is made in this book, is that the shadow polarities are never manifest on their own. They're always manifest in tandem, in particular with the king. So at times he shirks responsibility. He is, flip-flopping. He can't make a decision. Actually, that's another quality that I don't think we talked about, is that the proper manifested king is decisive. He makes a decision and he does it. He does what he says. And then the weakling doesn't do that. He might make promises and not follow through.
Yeah. The weakling is always paranoid that people are out to get him. And he doesn't, because he basically doesn't defend his borders. He doesn't protect his realm. So he's afraid that people are out to get him. And then this eventually turns into paranoia, which turns into anger, which turns him into the tyrant. So I think you made an excellent point relating the two, because they are always connected. One, usually the passive version results in the active version of the shadow.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that keeps happening. The passive one kind of inspires the lack inspires the aggression.
Yeah. So you could see it as the king who doesn't do what he's supposed to. Let's say he doesn't protect his borders, so all kinds of demons seep into his life, and then he has to lash out because he didn't do what he had to do. He didn't take responsibility when he needed it, and so now he has to take extreme measures.
Yeah. And
freak out and react, instead of, acting with purpose.
Yeah. So before we finish this, I want to maybe come up with some good examples of how this applies to just practical life, and in what level, because we're not all kings running realms and governing people. But I mean, there are kind of smaller versions of that. So let's talk about that, and then maybe we can talk about other ways to manifest the king archetype, and maybe some references, books and stuff.
Yeah. So the easiest, example in mundane life is that your home is your realm.
Yeah.
So whether you have a family or if you live alone, your home is your realm. And so you take responsibility for it. You have to be decisive in it. You have to have sovereignty within it. You have to protect it, etc. And
you have to create order in it as well. Yeah. That's probably one of the biggest things, because most of the time spent as the king is just creating and establishing order. You're not constantly defending borders. It's like you have to make the people within your kingdom work and be productive and be happy and be, encouraged and want to go out there and live their lives to the fullest. So your responsibility on a day-to-day basis is based there.
Right. So the king doesn't just create, he also inspires creativity.
Yeah. But I mean, the order, yeah, that's a good point. I was really thinking the order. But yeah, inspiring others as well is pretty important. So we talked about the family life, but it also could apply to your work if you're a leader at work, or if you want to become a leader. Probably one of the best ways to become a leader is to demonstrate those abilities early on and work as a team. But if you're occupying the king in his fullest, that version of the archetype, then you're going to be selfless and you're going to help other people. So your leadership is going to benefit other people. And then, that clearly positions you as the right kind of person to be, to move up in a company and become a real leader.
Yeah, that actually really reminds me of Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek.
Yeah, great book.
Yeah, it's about enabling others, about seeing other people's talents and making sure that they can flourish. Yeah.
Cool. So ways to manifest the king archetype.
Act with integrity. Decide what your principles are and stick to them. And obviously, as you get more life experiences, those principles might become adjusted as you gain more wisdom. But, acting from a center and not flip-flopping and keeping your word is part of manifesting that king energy.
It seems that one central thing across all of the archetypes is having a set of principles, working towards your set of principles. What kind of person, what kind of goals, what kind of vision you have, and sticking to it.
Yeah. What else with the king? Be decisive. Decide what you're going to do and then do it. Take responsibility. I'm really channeling Jordan Peterson here.
Yeah, clean up your room.
Clean up your room.
Stand up straight. Sorry. I noticed this in a bunch of the videos. I was just like all hunched over. So channel the king.
Yeah.
What else?
Inspire others, enable others, praise them, but not just on a surface level. Praise people for what their talents, accomplishments, abilities are legitimately. Let them know you appreciate them.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. Okay, so what are some of the movies or books or examples?
Honestly, the Lion King one just kind of blew my mind. This one, I want to go watch that right now. There's a new live action one coming out, actually, I think next year. It looks like shot for shot the exact same as the cartoon. Braveheart. Did you see that one?
No, I actually haven't seen that.
That one's Mel Gibson's in that. The end is pretty rough. Probably Lord of the Rings has got some good kings in it. Actually, it's got lots of versions. Yeah, it's got magicians, but it's got lots of versions of the king in all the shadow forms and the positive forms. So there's the one king who is possessed by a demon or a spell or something, and he's just like all scraggly and tyrannical and evil. And then the spell gets lifted and he becomes his positive version. But even once he becomes the positive version, he still has kind of remnants of the old paranoia and fear. And he almost becomes the weakling king after for a little bit. Yeah.
Well, Game of Thrones definitely has a lot of these archetypes. It's very, very archetypal. So it has some good kings. However,
Joffrey.
A lot of them don't survive. A lot of the good kings.
Yeah.
Well, Jon Snow is still alive.
Yeah, that's right. But Joffrey, what a Armchair Tyrant he is.
Yeah. And Weakling at the same time.
Yeah.
He has some really kind of gross breakdown moments.
Yeah. I think that's it. Like, I mean, this is a hard one. This one, I think, comes with experience and not age. Much else.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to focus on the other three. Well, being selfless, that's one you can put intention into.
And responsible.
And yeah, taking responsibility. That's right. So,
establishing order. 12 Rules for Life.
Yeah, exactly. Go read that book. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, that's a good way to end it. So I think this rounds up our masculine archetypes series. And next we're going to do the female ones. There's not as much literature on this one, so I'm not sure how that's going to go, but
there's some.
We'll see.
Yeah.
The book, and actually the book I read was King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And that one you guys should check out. We mentioned it in the first episode of this series. I don't know, is there a series equivalent for the women? We're going to have some research to do on this one.
I've read some stuff. There is an equivalent. Yeah.
Cool. All right, we'll get into this one. I'm interested in how the women will play out since most of our listeners are male. I'm interested to hear what the archetypes are like and what it looks like to be in a relationship or interact with women who are occupying these different archetypes in their fullest version and the tyrant version. I just would like to have a better idea of that. This might be helpful for relationships for men as well, to understand the female archetypes.
Yeah, for sure, because knowing the masculine archetypes is kind of how you get sovereignty in yourself, but then understanding the feminine archetypes is how you relate to others and how you understand how they see you.
Yeah. Do you know if there is sort of a cross compatibility with the archetypes, like men taking on female archetypes and vice versa?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, a lot of these archetypes are kind of mirrored in the feminine version.
Yeah. What are they?
So it depends on which system you follow. The one that I like in particular is Amazon, which is a parallel of the warrior, which is a parallel of the magician, She's also called crone sometimes, which is kind of like an older version.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be. And then mother is a
King.
parallel of or mother or queen is a parallel of the king. And then Hetaira, which is a parallel of the lover.
Hetaira, what's that?
It's a woman who is kind of interested in self-development and the pursuit and pleasing of men without necessarily having children.
Okay, so that's clearly the lover.
Yeah, the lover. Okay. So could be manifest as geisha, or in kind of the more shadowy versions could be a prostitute.
Okay. So obviously we'll do our research before we do the next episode. We usually do a ton of research before we do any episode. So yeah, we'll have some more information for you guys in the next one. Cool. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
This episode is brought to you by Qualia, a nootropic supplement that helps support mental performance and mood. To get 10% off, use the code FUTURE at checkout. And to learn more about neurohacking, visit futurethinkers.org/neuro.
Thanks for tuning in to Future Thinkers. For all the books, resources, and mentions from this episode, go to futurethinkers.org/76. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified of new videos. You can also follow us on social media to stay connected. If you'd like to get a t-shirt like the new Make America Think Again, go to futurethinkers.org/store. If you like what we do and you want to help us make more podcasts and videos, consider donating or becoming a patron at futurethinkers.org/support. Also visit our sponsor Qualia and use the coupon code FUTURE to get 10% off your purchase.